Well, hello, fellow YouTubers, friends and neighbors, and even potential adversaries. If there are any out there that want to argue with me about something or tell me I'm wrong, I don't mind. I'll go back and forth with you and defend my position, just like you might have yours. I'm going to talk today a little bit again more about LifeSpring because I've had several people make comments on my YouTube videos about LifeSpring. And let me just begin by saying that I was a LifeSpring member back in November of 1979 is when I enrolled and took the basic training. I was preliminary before that, prior to it, wanting to take EST, E-S-T, the Erner Werhard seminar training that I had heard about. I was amidst my first divorce. I was very much addicted to alcohol and drugs back at that time. A little bit of a mess, a party animal, had been doing cocaine for a year and a half prior, had a heavy cocaine habit that I curbed finally. And so I had financial problems. My life was a mess. I had not been living a very responsible, mature life at the age of 28 years old then. And I heard about this training. I had not been doing a whole lot in way of therapy. I'd had a couple of little brief therapy sessions, but not anything intense. And LifeSpring appeared before the EST, so I did not take the EST training. But I was turned on to LifeSpring by a woman that I just came across, a stranger. She told me about it, and I was interested, so I went to a meeting, what they call the guest meeting, guest event. And basically, they just tell you a little bit about what the trainings are, what it costs, how it goes, what the schedule. It was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evening from 6 p.m. until fairly late evening. Friday night went very late. And then Saturday, it was early morning, like 9 o'clock until 5, 6 p.m. And Sunday, it was a little bit shorter, also like 9 or 10 in the morning to about 4 in the or to the evening, I think. There was a break, and then the evening so-called graduation, where family and friends were invited to come watch you participate in your little graduation ceremony, which, just a 5-day training. It wasn't like a really big deal. But if you did complete the course and the training, you were allowed to re-audit and take it again anytime you want. Supposed to be free, but actually it turned out it was a $50 re-audit fee when I went to do that several years later. I didn't mind paying $50 to retake the training. The original training was $300 when I took it. I believe it's 350 maybe, 350 I believe. And then the advanced training after that, which I chose to go on and do, was $600 or $650. I can't really remember, but it was, at that time in 1979, 1980, that was quite a bit of money. And it's still not just a small amount today, but it was considerably worth more money back then. And then the final program, which is called the Training Coordinator Program that I went through, and it lasted several weekends of trainings. And these trainings are more like seminars. I don't mean it's a training like boot camp or anything in the military. They were seminars, workshops, where you have a speaker, you have exercises, processes they were called. Dyads, sometimes a dyad is one-on-one, where you have a partner and you might be engaged in sharing something or doing something in a process, and then you'd flip and the other person would do it, and you would share and participate supporting that person and this kind of thing. So I don't want to go into detail what they were, but they were interesting psychological exercises that helped you many times take a particular topic that they would talk about, whether it's trust, accountability, communication, whatever, and have an experience of yourself and how do I communicate, or how do I trust people? Do I trust or not trust? These kinds of things. And it would give you an experience of yourself that you could then reflect upon and then share and potentially learn. And that's what happened for me. These were not all analytical exercises where the teacher would tell you something and you take a test and tell them what you thought you learned. They were experiential, and that's why I loved LifeSpring and I liked it. The training coordinators, which I became eventually a training coordinator, were the volunteer people that would help with the trainings and do all kinds of background stuff to help people facilitate the process. And then there was a paid trainer that was the main speaker that directed the course of events and the exercises. And it was said right from the beginning, it was a business. It was a for-profit business. It was not nonprofit. It was not a religion, not a cult. But many people to this day think it's a cult. In fact, when I go on a search, I've done both the DuckDuckGo, Google search, of course, and there's one other one on here. Can't remember the name of it. It's from France. And I did all of them. And what came up was a Wikipedia page on John Hanley, the founder and owner of the company, And then there's another one that says LifeSpring is a cult. And some man, I don't remember his name, has a web page where he proclaims it's a cult because he had encountered former graduates and members of people who had gone through the program that claimed, that came on and he says they proselytize. And that's what Christians are famous for doing in the United States anyway, proselytizing, going out and trying to bend your arm and twist you to convert to Christianity, to accept Jesus as your Savior, come to a church meeting, blah, blah, blah. Basically selling you a product, even though you know they don't expect you to pay right on the spot, but ultimately you're going to pay one way or another with your time and energy, and usually with your wallet also. Most churches expect you to pay money. I mean, it's not required, but you are pressured in a way, you might say, expected anyway, to put a donation in there at some point, put some money in for God, for the church. And that's why I basically conclude most religions, here, I'm going to look up the definition. It says, some Christian groups label all smaller religious groups as a cult, especially those who do not share their own beliefs or hold beliefs that differ from their own. I would argue that almost all Christian denominations are cults. They're all cults. Political parties today are cults. I mean, there's cults all around us. I mean, I love cult movies. What's called a cult movie, it's a whole different kind of thing. These are very unusual, off-the-wall, obscure movies sometimes that are not popular in the mainstream, not necessarily commercially big hits, but movies that people favor, oftentimes horror movies, but not necessarily all horror. They can be all different types of genres that are like Harold and Maude is a cult movie, Eraserhead is a cult movie, Rocky Horror Picture Show is a cult movie, and I love cult movies. But that's another subject. A more famous cult would be the Jim Jones cult, the one where the people, Heaven's Gate, the people in California that all got together and drank some kind of poison. And, you know, these are fairly well recognized as cults. The Branch Davidian cult in Texas that were, you know, assaulted by the FBI and armed forces and burned up and killed because they did a standoff, you know, that sort of thing. So, cults, you know, Scientology has been classified as a cult by many, many people. I believe it likely is. Mormonism has been called a cult. I believe it is. But I believe Southern Baptists are cults too, and Catholics are cults. I believe most Islamic faith are cults. You know, there's only a few religions that I would say don't really fit the category of cults because they don't proselytize, and they don't pressure, and they don't ask for money all the time. And that's more like the Taoists and Buddhists. I couldn't speak for Hindus really, if they are or not. They might be cults too. But so what? There's good cults, there's bad cults. There's cults that can hurt people, there's cults that don't. So LifeSpring, let's get into that a little bit more. The training, they tell you from the beginning, if you do the complete training and you don't like it at the end, you do the entire training and you don't like it at the end, you can ask for your money back and you'll get a refund. And the only thing then is that they don't want to really see you again. I mean, they just don't want you coming back around. I suppose you could come back and pay again and do it all over again if you wanted. But other than that, once you get your refund, it's just bye-bye. We'll part friends, no hard feelings. And I know people who did that, who completed the training and, you know, not very many. In fact, I don't know any personally, but I heard from the trainers themselves that there were a few people that did ask for the money back at the end, and they got a refund. So that's great. If you did the whole training and you wanted a refund, you got it. If you did the whole training like I did and you felt it was worth 5, 10 times the amount of money you paid, which I did, great. I got my value, my money's worth. Because this talks on LifeSpring are going to go on for a while, I'm going to do this in probably 2 or 3 parts. So I'm just going to kind of wind it up here with this portion of the talk on LifeSpring for tonight. The cult aspect, saying that I personally, to this day still, do not consider LifeSpring to be a cult. Was there any proselytizing? It's hard for me to say what happened with the company from the years 1982, 83 on until it dissolved in the mid-90s. There were apparently a couple of lawsuits where one member in one of the trainings, whether it was the advanced training or the IPE training, which was an advanced training also, or the training coordinator program, or the basic, I don't know. But someone had, was a person that had asthma and was denied apparently by someone to take their medication. for whatever reason. That sounds kind of unusual and iffy. Hard to believe somebody would deny someone their medication, but apparently the person died because of that. And so LifeSpring settled that out of court, did not admit to any fault. And another one, someone that could not swim was told they needed to go in the water, maybe to confront their fear of water. That doesn't sound very smart either, to expect someone who cannot swim to get into water to confront their fear. And they drowned. And so again, LifeSpring settled out of court, did not admit fault. So I couldn't speak as to the details on that. Did LifeSpring devolve into a cult during those years into the 90s? Maybe it did. Maybe it did. I just couldn't say. I'd like to believe it didn't, but I couldn't speak for that. All I can speak is my experience, which is what I'm going to talk about in the remaining videos, why I got great value from LifeSpring, and to this day consider that it was a very significant positive time in my life. I didn't consider it ever to be along the lines of what I would think of as a cult. So there's part one. Stay tuned for part two.